Today's question has to do with when you vibrate, the movement it makes, and how it affects your playing. The violin moving back and forth. Let's hear the question and then we'll talk about that.
Hi Pierre, how are you? I did wanted to ask a question about vibrato and adding the bow. The problem is that every time that I want to vibrate on a particular note, my sound gets affected a little bit. Maybe it's because when I do the vibrato, maybe I pull too hard on the violin and that causes the bow to bounce a little bit. Or maybe my hand is not going really straight while I'm concentrating on doing this motion. It gets really difficult to coordinate both things at the same time. So I wanted to ask you if you have any recommendations on how can I work on this matter so I can get a clean sound while I'm vibrating. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. I'm doing great. Not only is that a good question, but it's the same question that I had from my teacher when I was a kid. His answer to me was, you don't need to worry about that. That didn't make much sense to me back then, and it probably doesn't make much sense to you either. But if you think about it, I think what he meant to say was go with the flow. When you vibrate, you're making a movement, yes, but you're also changing the pitch. You're going up and down with the pitch. You have a choice. You can clench on the violin a little bit to keep the violin a little more steady, or you can let the violin go. If you let the violin go, yeah, there'll be a movement that you can actually hear in the bow. But that movement will be rhythmical together with the same rhythm that comes from vibrating. In other words, the pulse is the same, the speed is the same. Doesn't matter that you can hear it because you really can't hear it. It's following the waves of your vibrato. Now, all of this is relative. You can vibrate just a little bit. You can vibrate more. And the more you vibrate, the more movement there'll be, which means the more audible the movement will be in your bow, right? The second thing you need to deal with is controlling the sound, the steadiness of a sound based on flexibility in your hand, okay? That's something you can work on. Your vibrato, by the way, looks really good. The motion in your hand, the rocking back and forth, looks very steady, and I didn't see your violin move very much either, which is great. There are two kinds of movements. One is negative, it's this movement, up and down. Reason it's negative is because the bow becomes heavy as you go down and it becomes light as you go up. Gravity is working against you. So if you can counteract jumping up and down, you can even practice if you like, then you can accomplish just about, absorbing any type of movement whatsoever, any negative movement. And a couple things you can use to your advantage to counteract movements while playing. One is finger flexibility. More finger flexibility than wrist flexibility because the wrist is kind of out of control. As you turn your wrist, the bow comes on a different angle. Whereas if you use your fingers, you can keep the bow going at the same angle. So try to develop a finger flexibility, maybe a little slight wrist as I'm doing right now, to absorb shocks. Another thing you can do is learn to turn the bow inwards and don't use your wrist again to turn the bow so that you're using the sides of the hairs. Rather, roll the bow. Roll the bow as far as it'll roll so that the contact is being made first on a few hairs before it bunches up and uses the rest of the hairs. That's actually a natural spring as well. Not applicable to all kinds of playing and all kinds of bowing, but to certain kinds of shock absorbing playing, changing bows and stuff like that. Loosening the hairs to the point where you're going to use your arch in the bow to your advantage. If the bow hairs are tightened too much, they become very springy and it can be really hard to control. So loosen the hairs to at least a pencil width or less. So those three things, finger flexibility, turning the bow inwards a bit, and not having the bow so tight, that will help you counteract bouncy bow. The other movement is this movement, which follows the direction of the bow, which actually can be used to the violinist's advantage. You can use it to make accents by going in the opposite direction of your bow with the violin. And you can also reduce accents by going in the same direction as the bow. So you can make accents or reduce accents. And you can move to the music, move to the beat by following by just following the motion of the bow rather than this. Now this, once again, is negative. This is not so negative and can be used to your advantage. If you have an idea for a Q&A, check out the instructions on the About This video beneath to see how you can submit your video to me, and I'll see about answering your question. Lastly, this is a Fiddlerman concert violin, and if you're interested in a violin like this, you can get it at fiddlershop.com. Thanks for watching.